Playing Fallout 4 in survival mode presents some unique challenges such as not being able to quick save, taking 200% more damage, incurring illnesses and so much more. And in this ultimate survival guide, I am going to do a deep dive into exactly what survival mode is and go through all the differences between the other game mode difficulties. Hi, I'm Mo and I'm trapped in Fallout. To use survival mode, you will first need to actually turn it on through the in-game settings. And once you turn it on, you will not be able to turn it back on after turning it off. So once you turn on survival mode, if you turn it back off for whatever reason, you will not be able to turn it back on again. In other words, you can play in survival mode just once per game playthrough, and if you ever turn it off, you will not be able to turn it back on again in that same playthrough. Firstly, let's look at saving in game. Outside of survival mode, you can manually save the game anytime. The game allows you to also quick save and also auto save when entering or changing locations. In survival mode, this is almost completely taken away from you. The only way to save your game in survival mode is by sleeping in a bed. An autosave is also generated when you exit the game, but this is automatically deleted the moment you load your game back up again. The concept of not being able to manually save your game, quick save or automatically save when entering a location is completely removed in the survival mode. This is perhaps one of the biggest impacts of this mode, as you lose your ability to frequently save your game. So when playing in survival mode, make sure to constantly save your game by looking out for beds. In survival mode, fast travel is completely disabled. This means you cannot go into your Pip-Boy world map and quickly travel to another location. This essentially forces you to walk everywhere. The next best thing you could do is to unlock the Vertibird via the Brotherhood of Steel, as this will allow you to at least freely and quickly move around the map without sort of incurring any enemies. Alternatively, you can invest some legendary armor that allows you to move faster or sprint quicker, so on. But the bottom line is, in survival mode, you cannot fast travel anymore. When traveling outside of survival mode, i.e. playing the game in any other difficulty such as normal, easy or hard, location icons will appear on your compass well before you even see them on your screen. However, the distance where that location icon appears on your compass in survival mode is reduced significantly when playing in that mode. This makes it effectively much more difficult to find locations when playing in survival mode. So what does this actually mean? Typically, this means that you will see the icon of a location on your compass when you're pretty much right next to it. This actually forces you as the player to explore more and can in a sense cause issues, as you would not be able to judge how far away you are from your next save point, settlement, rest point, weapon restock, etc. Not really knowing where the closest possible locations are, especially safe locations, is definitely an issue. So do be cautious and aware of your surroundings when traveling, because your compass won't really help you, not as much as it does in other difficulty modes. Outside of survival mode, after you clear a location, it usually respawns enemies after about 20 in-game days. In survival mode, this has been increased to be between anywhere 35 to around 80 days, making it take much more longer. This essentially means you can't just keep going to the same places again and again in hopes of getting more XP or more loot. You are effectively forced to venture out into the more difficult areas or into the more hostile areas outside of your comfort zone, simply because the enemies that you may have been taken down or you know you can take down just simply will not respawn anymore. You have to travel and venture out. So this is one key difference: the amount of time it takes for enemies to respawn in cleared out locations. Outside of survival mode, you will find stronger enemies appear as you level up in the game. So The more higher your level, the stronger the enemies will start to appear. In survival mode, however, stronger enemies will appear regardless of your player level. So if you're unlucky, you might actually end up encountering strong enemies pretty much after leaving Vault 111. Stronger enemies are usually shown with what looks like a skull icon next to their health bar, and likewise, when playing on survival mode, you are also much more likely to encounter legendary enemies more frequently whilst playing in that mode. So again, when playing in survival mode, the possibility or the likelihood of you encountering stronger enemies is much more significant and much more earlier than in other difficulty modes. In survival mode, you will do the same amount of damage you would do if you were playing Fallout 4 in the hard difficulty settings. So the amount of damage you do whilst playing Fallout 4 in hard is exactly the same in terms of the amount of damage you do to enemies when playing in survival mode. However, you will take 200% more damage whilst playing in survival mode, which is significantly more than any other mode. This is probably very obvious, but it is way easier for enemies to take you out in survival mode than it is for you to take out enemies in survival mode. There is one thing in your favor, the adrenaline perk, and we'll talk about that in a moment. There is one possible way of you doing more damage to enemies, but for the most part, when playing in survival mode, you will take 200% more damage than anyone else. In survival mode, enemies will actually give you twice as much XP, making it easier to level up by taking out enemies. Thankfully, this is a good thing as it does help to balance the game a little. As long as you invest in some good armor and weapons early enough in the game and make some sensible choices when it comes to perks, you will be able to take out most of the early few hours worth of enemies you will see in the game, and as a result you will get a fair amount of XP for this. This also works with other things as well that grant you XP, such as doing quests, picking locks, hacking terminals, etc. In survival mode, you will have access to the adrenaline perk, which effectively allows you to do more damage to enemies. This perk is given to you automatically when you start to increase your kill count of enemies. At 5 kills, you will get a 5% damage bonus, and this will be presented to you as a rank in the adrenaline perk. At 10 kills, you will get a bonus of 10%, and this goes all the way up to a damage bonus of 50% as long as you maintain 50 kills. This means there are a total of 10 ranks in this perk. Now, there is a bit of a downside to this. Each time you go to sleep, depending on the number of hours you sleep in a bed, a number of ranks is actually removed from the perk. So, if you sleep for 1 hour, then 2 ranks are removed from the perk. If you decide to sleep for more than 2 hours, then 3 ranks are removed. For sleeping 3 hours, 4 ranks are removed, and so on. If you decide to sleep for over 7 hours, then all 10 ranks will be removed from the perk. So unless if you must, try not to sleep for more than 6 hours at a time. But obviously, if you don't happen to have any ranks in the perk anyway, then go ahead and sleep and rest up. Now let's talk about wellness, a really big and impactful area of survival mode. When playing in survival mode, you will now start to gain some negative effects known as exhaustion, hunger, and thirst, and these directly impact your special stats as well as some other areas of gameplay. When it comes to exhaustion, you will notice that you will become exhausted when you go a certain amount of time without sleeping. When you don't sleep in game, over time, you will slowly become exhausted. As a result, you will see your action points reduced. You will also see your agility, strength, and luck special stats reduced whilst being exhausted. In order to recover from exhaustion, you basically need to sleep in game. The more you sleep, the more you recover from exhaustion. Now, naturally, this also affects your adrenaline, i.e., the more you sleep, the less damage you will do, given the more number of ranks will be removed from your perk. The second is hunger. You will become hungry when you go a certain amount of time without eating. Over time, you will slowly become hungry, and as a result, your endurance, charisma, and luck will go down. To recover from hunger, you basically need to start eating food in-game. Try to always eat cooked food, as there are plenty of good sources, and eating from radiated food also leads to other issues that we'll get to in a moment. And lastly, thirst. You will become thirsty when you go a certain amount of time in game without drinking any fluids or any water. As a result, your intelligence, perception and luck will go down. To recover from thirst, you basically need to keep up your fluids, so drink plenty of purified water to stay away from thirst. Now let's start to talk about illnesses. To begin with, let's talk about fatigue, probably because it's the most compelling one out of all of them. When playing in survival mode, you will now become fatigued, and this may happen randomly when you're either exhausted, hungry or thirsty. Fatigue is actually, as said, a form of illness in the game, and you are likely to get it whenever you are either hungry, thirsty or tired. When you are fatigued, this will cause your available points, so your action points, to be reduced, and the more fatigued you are, the more of your total AP will be removed and reduced from your AP bar. So you will start to see your AP bar sort of being populated with a red bar, as this means that there's a certain amount of action points you cannot use. Being fatigued also increases the chances of you catching other diseases, but we'll get to that in a moment. The highlight here is you're fatigued is basically your gateway to creating a whole host of problems in the game. So make sure if you're fatigued to try and resolve it as quickly as you're able to. With fatigued spoken about, now let's talk about another pretty important part of the game, illnesses, which will play a significantly big role within survival mode. When playing in survival mode, you can now catch diseases, and there are a total of 6 different diseases. They are fatigue, infection, insomnia, lethargy, parasites and weakness, and we're going to go through each one. When you are fatigued, as already discussed, this will cause you to become exhausted much more quickly, forcing you to sleep more often. It is important you get rid of fatigue, as this directly impacts your chances of catching other diseases. Fatigue tends to last for 6 days. Illnesses in general are actually automatically recovered from after playing a certain amount of days in game. So if you decide not to cure illnesses, and we'll get to that in a moment, they can be automatically removed after you've basically suffered from them for some amount of days. So when it comes to fatigue, it is usually removed after 6 in-game days. Next, let's talk about infection. When you get an infection, this will cause you to take periodic damage once every 90 seconds in-game. That said, if you happen to be at 1 HP, then you will no longer take any damage. So an infection will not outright kill you when you are low on HP, but it will certainly help to get you to that low HP state. An infection can last up to about 3 days. Next, let's talk about insomnia. You can get insomnia, and this reduces the amount of exhaustion that is recovered when sleeping. In other words, you will need to sleep twice as much to reduce your exhaustion when sleeping if you happen to be affected by insomnia. And insomnia tends to last about 2.5 days in game. Next, let's talk about lethargy. This is another disease that you can catch, and this will cause your AP points to regenerate 50% slower. Lethargy tends to last for 4 days, and this is actually really bad for anyone that uses VATS. This is also particularly bad in survival mode, since you can't fast travel anywhere anyway, and you will need to pretty much rely on sprinting to get around the map. Again, this is bad to have when you consider the fact that you will probably not be able to run away from most situations if you happen to be suffering from this illness. So again, do take worry of this and do fix it as quickly as you're able to. Now let's talk about parasites. Parasites cause the food you eat to reduce your hunger by 50% less. In other words, you will need to eat twice as much food to recover from hunger when you are hungry and you are affected by the parasite's infection or parasite's illness. Parasites tend to last for, I think, about 7 days. And lastly, weakness. Weakness is the last illness, and this will cause you to take 20% more damage. And this is on top of the already 200% damage that you would take whilst playing in survival mode. Luckily, weakness only really tends to last for about 2 days, but in either case, make sure you get that healed, because this could be your one-way ticket to get in one shot pretty much by the tiniest of rad roaches. Now, while we are talking about diseases and illnesses, you can actually increase your resistance to them by taking herbal medicine in the game. You can take herbal stimulant, and this will add resistance towards fatigue and lethargy. You can take herbal antimicrobial, and this will increase your resistance to infection and parasites. And finally, you can take herbal anodyne, and this will increase your resistance towards insomnia and weakness. All of the herbal medicines can be crafted at chemistry stations, and they can also be randomly found in the Commonwealth and purchased from doctors. Now, lastly, and thankfully, you can cure these diseases by a number of things. The most two common things being by taking some antibiotics, or by speaking to a doctor, or as we've already discussed, just waiting it out, allowing it to sort of cure by itself. You can craft your own antibiotics from the chemistry station, or you can purchase them from doctors, or the more easier route actually is to visit a doctor and use the cure me option, and this will actually cure both your HP and it will remove any illnesses that you might have at the time. Now let's talk about healing radiation. So in survival mode, when consuming Radaway, this will heal your radiation, but it will also give you fatigue, and therefore it will increase your chances of catching a disease. If you consume any beverages in survival mode, then thankfully this also heals your radiation for, I think it was about 100 rad with no side effects. And you can also heal radiation by simply going to a doctor. Whilst we are talking about radiation, let's also talk about healing. In survival mode, when you take items such as stim packs that restore HP, your HP will be restored but at a significantly slower rate. Basically, it takes a very long time for your health bar to be recovered when you take a stim pack or any other HP recovery items in survival mode. So chances are that when you take any healing items whilst playing in survival mode, you will probably need to take some cover away from any melee attacks or any ballistic damage or so on, because your health bar won't instantly just fill up. It will take some time. So do be aware of that when you take HP items. What you can't do is take a HP item and then go running in gun-ho into a fight. What you probably want to do is take a HP item and actually run away to give yourself some time to recover your health. Now let's talk about crippled limbs in survival mode. When playing in survival mode, if you happen to be unlucky and get a crippled limb, they will not automatically recover. You will need to use a stim pack, or you will need to sleep, or you will need to speak to a doctor to actually heal your crippled limb. This naturally also affects your gameplay. So if you get hit in the head, your vision will be blurry. If you happen to get hit in either arms, then when looking down a barrel, it won't be as steady. And if you happen to get hit in either legs, which is probably the worst of the three actually, then you will not be able to sprint anymore. Now, when you think about it, in survival mode, being able to sprint plays a key role, especially when it comes to surviving any enemies that you know you probably will not be able to take out. Not being able to run is a pretty big deal in survival mode. So do make sure if you happen to have any crippled limbs that you take care of them as soon as you can. In survival mode, ammunition now has a weight limit. This means that you cannot endlessly carry around all the ammo you want, as this will rather make you go over your current base weight limit rather quickly. That said, your overall base carry weight limit is also reduced when playing in survival mode. This essentially means that you will not be able to carry as much as you can in other game difficulty modes, such as easy, normal, hard, so on. And you will also need to start thinking about taking items that you probably may not have in other modes, such as food items or water. You will also need to consider what weapons to actually take with you when playing survival mode, simply because the weight of some ammo are actually heavier than the weight of other ammos. So for example, if you decide to take some mini nukes or missiles, you will find that they weigh significantly more than standard basic ammo type. And because of this reason, carry weight is effectively affected in survival mode. Carry plays a really important role in survival mode because you can't simply hoard everything and take everything you want. You need to be a lot more selective with what 8 items you have, what weapons you have, what armor you have, what food you have, and so on. Now let's talk about being over encumbered. In survival mode, when you are over encumbered, you will become fatigued, again increasing your chances of catching a disease. So if you happen to be carrying more than you actually can, that window will open up the chance of you catching a disease. When being over encumbered, your agility and endurance will also be reduced, meaning you will not be able to move as much and your HP will basically go down. And this also, on top of that, will cause you periodic limb damage when you are over encumbered. In other words, you also run the risk of crippling your legs. That said, if you happen to have the 4th rank in the strong back perk, then this does negate the effects of this somewhat, but Essentially, the highlight here is being over encumbered in survival mode is a pretty bad deal to be in, as this A won't let you run, B will open up options to you being affected by other diseases, and C basically reduces your base HP. So try not to be over encumbered. As you can tell, this plays a part in the carry weight as well. Again, it's forcing you to be very selective with what you carry in the game. And lastly, companions in survival mode. When playing with companions in survival mode, if a companion becomes unconscious, they will not automatically get back up in combat. They must be healed by you, and if you do not and decide to leave them out in the open, they will simply leave you and just go back to whatever settlement you found them in originally. So for example, let's just say you had Dogmeat and Dogmeat was injured and you did not heal Dogmeat and you walked off. Dogmeat will leave you and go back to Red Rocket Truck Stop because that is where you found Dogmeat. That said, any non-NPC robot companions will be destroyed instead. So any robots that you create will not go back to settlements, they will instead be nuked out of existence. And the last thing with companions is that their carry weight is actually also affected when playing in survival mode. Basically, they will not be able to carry as much. So companions do need a little bit of looking after when playing in survival mode. And if you are not able to look after them, or if you, for example, decide to run away from a battle and they aren't able to catch up and they happen to get injured in the process, they will basically leave you. In this guide, I went through basically everything I know and everything that I think you need to know about survival mode in Fallout 4. But knowing as much as we know now about survival mode will not help you much, not unless you have the right equipment. Click on the video you see on the screen now and I will show you the locations to 21 great early, unique and legendary weapons you can get in Fallout 4. Click on the video you see on the screen now to find out more.